coming up tonight on VCU InSight.
I'm Heba Ahmad. Coming up tonight on VCU InSight, the fight over President Donald Trump's travel ban has made its way into Richmond. I'll take you inside the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals to hear both sides of the argument.
I'm Wanye Reese. Strike the hike. That's the message that VCU students have for VCU administrators. Coming up, we'll have student reaction about a proposed tuition increase.
I'm Ryan Carsons, and coming up, I'll share with you how the REAL program at the Richmond City Justice Center is helping felons restart their lives once they leave prison. And that all begins right behind this door.
All this and more.
VCU InSight starts right now.
From the Richard T. Robertson School of Media and Culture at Virginia Commonwealth University, named Best Student Newscast in the Mid-Atlantic, this is VCU InSight.
Good evening and welcome to VCU InSight. I'm Tiana Mosby.
And I'm Coley Carey. Thanks for joining us. After a series of losses in courts across the country, President Donald Trump's revised travel ban has been heard in the 4th District Court of Appeals here in downtown Richmond. Heba Ahmad and Alexandra Sosik were both in the courthouse to provide team coverage. But first, let's send it out to Heba to give us a breakdown of the hearing. Heba? That's right, Coley. In a rare move made by the court, a panel of 13 judges heard arguments from the ACLU and the federal government. The central question, should Donald Trump's comments on the campaign trail come back to haunt him as president?
What he said was that Islam hates us. What he said was that we have a problem with Muslims in the United States.
Strong words from ACLU attorney Omar Jedwat during a 2-hour hearing at the Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia. Jeffrey Wall, acting Solicitor General, opened up the hearing by defending the revised executive order as a matter of national security.
The president and his advisors for months had been talking about ISIS and al-Qaeda, Islamic terrorist groups that pose a threat to the nation. The president was talking about countries and groups that may intend to do us harm.
But the panel openly questioned this argument, referencing comments President Trump made on the campaign trail more than a year ago.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
Have we ever known any time in history we've had this, where anybody who is ascended to the presidency take that position, where it's very pointed of Muslims are absolutely just not people we want in this country, and then you then enact a executive order within 7 days that's declared by the courts to be unconstitutional?
He's never repudiated what he said about the Muslim ban. It's still on his website. The district court here found that it's on his website, campaign website, today.
Those exact comments had vanished from President Trump's campaign website by the time closing arguments were made. However, Jedwat says what can't be erased is the president's intention to single out an entire religious community.
He has every intention of banning people from this country based on their religion, and that can't be lawful.
The ACLU says the fight against religious discrimination continues, even if it takes them to the Supreme Court. But for now, I'm Heba Ahmad with VCU InSight.
Thanks, Heba. Now let's turn to InSight's Alexandra Sosik, who gives us a look at protests right outside the court.
More than 100 people gathered right here outside the courthouse as tensions ran high in protest of President Trump's travel ban just moments before oral arguments were heard inside. The Asian American Justice Center organized the protest outside of the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals, and John Yang, president and executive director of the AAJC, says that everyone has been an immigrant at one point, even President Trump.
Or he is a descendant of immigrants. Certainly his wife is an immigrant. And so what we want to try to do is embrace all of that. And yes, maybe we have our political differences, but that shouldn't stop us all from feeling American.
Protesters lined up outside of the courthouse as they held signs, and they marched around the perimeter of the building, chanting their message. The Muslim ban is got to go. After the march, the protesters gathered out front to listen to a series of speakers. Stacey Lovelace and Aaliyah Farouk met for the first time today, and Stacey says one way to fight hate is learning about someone who is different than her.
There's going to be bad people from any community, but I mean, I think this is a clear example of why banning a certain group of people from America is wrong.
While the overwhelming majority of protesters are against the travel ban, Pedro Rios has a different opinion.
Go to another Muslim country like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, or Qatar and be around your own brethren, your own religion. Why would you want to come here and try to change what we have going on here? We don't need it. We're becoming full.
But Yang says it's important to support people of different races and ethnicities that make up the American community.
Having that sort of solidarity, having that sort of togetherness, especially in this day and age where there's this notion of xenophobia, this notion of anti-foreigner, is, I think, very important to all of us.
Yang says he'll know what the organization's next step is after the court delivers a decision. But for now, I'm Alexandra Sosik, VCU InSight.
Thanks, Alex. Here with me now is Assistant Professor and VCU InSight Legal Analyst, Dr. Bill Ovalle. So I was in the hearing yesterday, and the judges asked some pretty tough questions. But you've mentioned before that we shouldn't pay too much attention to the way that the lawyers are being treated. Why is that?
Thanks, Eva. Yeah, that's exactly right, because what happens, it may indeed mean, if they're giving one lawyer a harder time than another lawyer, that they have a problem with that particular lawyer's argument, but it may also mean that they agree with that lawyer and they just want to find any weaknesses there may be in that lawyer's argument, or they already know there's a weakness and they want to see how that lawyer will handle it. They want to all have, no matter which way they decide, they want it to be the strongest decision possible, because it may go to the Supreme Court ultimately, or it may just stand on its own. So they'd like it to be just as good a decision as they possibly can.
Great. So this hearing was an en banc hearing, which is pretty uncommon. So can you tell us how rare it is and why the change?
It's actually very rare for an initial hearing. Now, the way it normally works is they will have maybe 3 justices who will hear a case. With 15 justices on the court, that means they can hear 5 cases at a single time, which means that they can get a lot more cases through. And then if the losing party wants to appeal to the full court, they can do it, and the court may or may not agree to hear that as a full court. But for the full court to hear it in the initial hearing, I think I read that it's been 25 years since this particular court has done that, so it's very rare.
Great. And finally, where do you see this case going from here? Do you think a trip to the Supreme Court is inevitable? I
think it's very likely, because it involves a very, very important constitutional question relating to executive orders. Now, there's at least one other circuit that's hearing a case as well that's coming up, and they may reach different conclusions. They may reach the same conclusion, but it'll be based on different cases, because the one out in California is going to be based on a Hawaii judge's decision. So what they will probably both do is the losing party, let's say it's the government, we don't know, but if they lose, they would both appeal, presumably, to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court could decide to take just one of those cases, or they could decide to take both of them together and sort of put them together in one hearing, especially if they base their decisions on different reasoning. The court may want to put them together.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Ovalle.
Thanks.
Let's send it back to the desk. The first gubernatorial Democratic debate of 2017 took place in Fairfax County, with the lieutenant governor and former congressman going head-to-head over free college tuition, raising the minimum wage, and health care. Nora Deer has more on what Ralph Northam and Tom Perriello have to say.
Eager supporters lined up for Virginia's first gubernatorial debate to support Virginia Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam and former Congressman Tom Perriello.
Let's go, Tom! Let's go, Tom!
The two Democratic candidates gave their opinions on a number of hot topics, including abortion.
I strongly support a woman's right to choose. I have long supported Roe v. Wade and believe that it's not enough just to ensure that that right exists on paper, but that there is meaningful and affordable access to that right.
I remind people all the time, there is no excuse that a group of legislators, by the way, most of whom are men, should be telling women what they should and shouldn't be doing with their bodies.
Free 2-year community college.
And those who are doing everything we beg them to do, work hard, play by the rules, get that college education, shouldn't be handed a diploma plus $40,000 in debt. We should be moving them into the middle class.
Get skilled, get a job, and give back, with the understanding that once someone goes through 2 years of community colleges that it's paid for, if they're certified, then they will give back 1 year of public service.
The death penalty and gun laws.
I am opposed to the death penalty. I support life in prison without parole.
I think this is going to require continuing to reach out across the aisle and, frankly, getting responsible gun owners to play a more active role in distancing themselves from the NRA.
And raising the state minimum wage.
Tom and I have both agreed that the minimum wage needs to go to 15, and then we can work after that.
Debate attendee Amanda Parker Hazelwood says she left the debate feeling confident in both candidates.
Like, we've got two candidates with a lot of substance and a lot of energy. I think Virginia's in good hands no matter what.
Both Northam and Perriola will be on the ballot this June 13th for Virginia's gubernatorial primaries, but only one will get to continue on in November for the race to call this governor's mansion home. For VCU InSight, I'm Nora Deer.
The gubernatorial election is scheduled for November 7th. Both candidates have urged voters to make sure they are registered to participate.
The U.S. criminal justice system holds a staggering 2.3 million felons, according to the prisonpolicy.org. And the U.S. Sentencing Commission states that nearly half of the offenders who are released from prison are sent back for another crime. But there's hope. InSight's Ryan Carson's reports on a program providing a unique opportunity for some former inmates.
Today is graduation day at the Richmond City Justice Center, and these men get to celebrate their accomplishments with friends and family. Each graduate chose to make a change in their lives so they could have a real future. Recovering from everyday addictive behaviors is the program Dr. Sarah Scarborough created, and it educates recovering addicts from the habits that got them behind bars, such as drugs and violence.
The real program inside is over 40 hours a week of programming, so it is intense all the time. So they come out with a very strong foundation, which most folks coming out of incarceration at other places do not have.
Lloyd Burns is a graduate of the program, and he shared some of his plans once he's released from jail.
One of the long-term goals it has for me is to have the tools and skills to go out and pursue a job, my family, my home.
But where these ex-felons live after incarceration is extremely important, according to Dr. Sarah Scarborough.
Most of the time, if housing is not arranged for people coming out of incarceration, they go back to the same places they were before.
That's why Dr. Scarborough got this house for ex-felons to adjust back to life after incarceration. And this is where real program graduate Antonio Williams says he's ready to be a better father and son.
I spend more time with my daughters. Normally I wouldn't, it'd just be miss and go. But today we got a pretty good relationship. Me and her mother got a pretty good relationship. And she also tells me how proud she is.
You can smell the fresh paint in the real house. But for guys like Charles and Antonio, it's a fresh start to the next chapter of their lives.
I feel like don't judge a book by its cover. Maybe if you take the time to ask me, I can shed some light on what I've been through and where I'm at now, and maybe you will respect me a little more.
For VCU InSight, I'm Ryan Karstens.
The 8 newly released ex-felons from the REAL program will live in a supervised house on Dinwiddie Avenue for 6 months before being relocated after a year, when they will become fully independent citizens. Some VCU students say they are fired up over another proposed tuition hike for fall 2017. We have been following this story since the VCU Board of Visitors proposed the increase just a few weeks ago. InSight's Wanye Reese is live in the studio with student reactions to the proposal.
The message was clear from students at this protest, Tiana. They are sick and tired of continuing tuition hikes. About 30 VCU students gathered on the campus to protest a proposed tuition hike by VCU. Students like Chris says he does not think there should be another increase.
No, I think that there's more than enough money in the budget to be reallocated to
raises and, everything to make up for the funding.
And some students just want to know where tuition money is going.
We want to see a clear list of where our tuition is going to, specifically. And we do feel like there should be a cap.
Organizers passed out these pamphlets that detailed how students on VCU's campus feel about another proposed tuition increase.
Now, with a proposed tuition hike, this is how much a VCU student may have to pay next year. If a 4.5% increase is approved, a student would pay $494 on the lower side, and on the higher side, a student could pay $696 more a year, according to the Board of Visitors' latest budget workshop. In a recent interview, VCU President Dr. Rao recognized the burden of another tuition increase and explained how additional financial aid helps offset debt.
One of the big things that I've done when I arrived, you mentioned 2009, we had about $3 million in student financial assistance for this institute, internally for students at this institution. And we actually have raised that to $31 million. And so that's helping to offset a lot of the costs, and it's certainly leveling off debt. With regard to administrators, I understand that as well, and those numbers are big.
And the Board of Visitors are meeting next week to vote on this tuition increase, and some VCU students said they plan on doing the same thing, protesting this vote. For VCU InSight, I'm Wanye Reese.
Thanks, Wanye. Job cuts are hitting the newspaper industry hard. The reason? The rise of social media and free internet news sites. InSight's Alex Johnson talked with a social media expert from the Richmond Times-Dispatch, which has been forced to lay off 33 full-time employees in recent weeks. The big question, how to stay in business in a fiercely competitive news landscape.
These days, it seems like no matter where you go, people are always on their phones, often scrolling through Instagram, Facebook, or a Twitter feed. But these social media apps aren't just used to keep up with friends anymore. Experts like those from the Pew Research Center say it's now where over half of American adults are getting their news. Even famous news outlets like CNN and the Washington Post have Snapchat stories to update their followers. So, what does this mean for traditional news outlets like local newspapers?
It has been a struggle to try to market a product that people our age have gotten for free their entire lives.
Alex Fisher, a social media and marketing analyst for the Richmond Times-Dispatch, a local newspaper, says a challenge, but one they're willing to embrace by...
I'm the first person in the newspaper who's been tasked solely with trying to create a social media strategy. 30% of our web traffic comes through Facebook. I mean, Facebook is a huge audience for us.
And although Alex says their digital audience is bigger than ever, they are still facing major financial setbacks and had to fire 33 full-time employees last month. Almost half worked in the newsroom.
To be more efficient digitally, it takes less people.
Even newspaper reporters like Patrick Wilson admit how quickly social media is growing and changing the way people are reading news.
Look around whatever city you're in, people are not carrying newspapers, they're not reading a newspaper, but they are on their phone.
But he says social media is not the enemy of the newspaper. It's actually allowing them to reach a wider audience.
I can put out a question myself and say, does anybody know anyone affected by this? If so, I might want to talk to you. So it's a great tool for a journalist to use as well.
The Richmond Times-Dispatch says the key to remaining a relevant news source is embracing social media and using it to develop a closer relationship with their audience, which they say is larger than ever. If you'd like to subscribe to their full online digital paper, you can do so for $8.99 a month. InSight's Hui Zai interviewed VCU's visiting scholar and former Washington Post writer Bob Levy and discussed fake news and other issues of media and journalism. Hui?
Thanks. I'm here with Bob Levy, a prize-winning journalist who worked for Washington Post for 36 years. He's best known for his column, Bob Levy's Washington. Bob also had an extensive career as a commentator, TV and radio talk show host. He's now a visiting professor at VCU Robertson School of Media and Culture. Thank you, Bob. Thank you for joining us. You have seen a lot of changes in news industry. So what is the biggest change you have witnessed?
Well, certainly the biggest is the arrival of the internet, which is just 25 years old.
All the changes that the internet has caused in the news industry are as young as you are, and they are still being developed and they're still being understood. But the business model has changed totally, and the speed with which news arrives and the speed with which it's reported and written is faster than it's ever been before.
Okay. Fake news has become a part of 2016 national election. So what can we do to make sure we know the difference between fake news and real news?
Well, there's always been controversy about how accurate news can be, and there has always been inaccurate journalism. I often say, not only here at the Robertson School but elsewhere, that I wish I could have back every story I've ever written, and it's thousands of them, so that I could make one more phone call and make it a little more accurate. But that isn't what fake news means, and it's not what fake news has come to mean in the political process. President Trump means any story that he doesn't like or any story that doesn't portray him in a favorable way is automatically fake news. That is not true. I know that's not true, but what we need in this discussion is readers and viewers and listeners who are willing to accept news and seek news from reputable sources.
Okay. The Post and the New York Times both enjoyed their surge in subscription and circulation since the election of Donald Trump. So what is the reason, do you think, for that development?
I think a lot of people began to understand, maybe for the first time, that well-reported, carefully edited news, the opposite of fake news, is expensive to produce. It takes people, it takes time, and it takes a lot of layering of careful wording and careful sourcing. It is expensive because people like to get paid and people like to eat their meals, and therefore you can't just sit there and type on a laptop and do as well as the New York Times can do. But understanding where we are in the business side is a topic that we could spend an hour on, and we don't have an hour. But I think more and more the surge of interest in the Post and the New York Times and some other newspapers and digital websites is the result of the attacks on the media by the president, who has said that the media are, quote, the enemy of the American people, something I never thought I would hear a president say. But indeed, there is a lot of resistance, and it's taking the form of buying these products.
Okay. I understand. You are the Robertson School 27 commencement speaker.
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so what message do you want to give to our young journalists?
Well, the message will be very short because I think they want to get to the brownies and the cupcakes and the punch and get off of their gowns and get on with their lives. So I'm not going to speak for a long time, but my message will be that their time at the Robertson School is only the beginning and should only be the beginning. And what I hope they have learned here is the habit of lifelong learning. That's certainly been true of me. I graduated from college a long time ago, and I'm still learning, and I hope that these students can and will do the same.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I've been talking with Bob Levy. Now let's send back to the desk.
VCU's very own Tony Leslie James has just been nominated for Broadway's biggest award. InSight's Nora Deer is here with the highly honored theater professor. Nora?
I'm here with VCU theater professor and two-time Tony nominee, Tony Leslie James. Professor James has been nominated for a 2017 Tony Award for costume design for the August Wilson drama Jitney. Thanks for being here, Tony.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes, and of course, congratulations. I know the Tony nominee is not just the only nomination you've gotten recently. Can you tell us about some of the other ones?
I was nominated for a Dramatist Award, two. I was nominated for Outstanding Costume Design for a musical and Outstanding Costume Designer for a play. One for Jitney, and the musical has Come From Away. So it's very excited.
Yeah,
very exciting. It's been 21 years since I was nominated for a drama. It doesn't have two in 1 year. It's pretty
amazing.
special.
Yeah, of course. And I know that you also you hire VCU students, is that correct?
Yes, that's my support, my people. My illustrator, my assistant designer. We had a second-year graduate student who also worked for 5 weeks on Come From Away in New York. So we have a network. The students, they're well trained. I'll be the first to admit that. And they go to New York or they work all over the country. And the great thing about it is I'm able to hire my students, and my students are also able to hire other students. So I think that's the way it's supposed to work. And if your program's working, I think you have happy students all over the country.
Yeah, for sure. So they're definitely paying it forward, what you've given them. So that's good. I know you also split your time between New York, living in New York, and living in Richmond.
Well, it's great, but I consider Richmond my home because the house and the yard and the dog are in Richmond. But yes, we have an apartment in New York because my husband also teaches in New York, and because I work in New York, my career is really New York based, so we maintain a residence and we go back and forth.
Okay, and I know you, of course, like New York because it's close to all your plays and all that. So what advice do you have for students that want to make it to Broadway?
Well, I think the best advice is be prepared to take any job. And that also means if you have to take a non-theater job to support yourself, take the job, It's just, I think the most important fact is just don't lose sight of your goals. Everybody's like, oh, you moved to New York, and I was in New York for 14 years before I designed a Broadway show. No, 12. But it took a while, and I did a variety of jobs to get there.
Yeah. So what is up next for you?
Up next, I'm actually in rehearsal. I just got back on Saturday for Sunday in the Park with George at the Guthrie Theater in Minneapolis.
Wow. Okay. And thank you again for being here with us.
I appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've been speaking with Tony Leslie James. Make sure to tune in on June 11th for the Tony Awards on CBS. Let's send it back.
Do you like to bike? All through the month of May, Richmond is holding biking events for the community. May is RVA Bike Month, and throughout Richmond, events are being held almost daily from April 29th to May 31st to promote bike awareness. According to CBS 6, this Bike Month's theme is Fall in Love with Bike Lanes, which supports Richmond's plans of adding 25 more miles of bicycle infrastructure. Bike shop owner Braden Gavani says he loves seeing Richmond's growing support for bicyclists.
Improvements to bike infrastructure, take time because there's a lot of moving pieces involved. I think Richmond's doing a great job. A better job can always be done. I do think that the overall direction is a really positive one, though.
Gavani says that the bike infrastructure will only grow with community support.
There just needs to be a continued effort from advocacy groups, from clubs, from individual riders to continue putting pressure on their city council.
This past Sunday, Good Shepherd Episcopal School held a bike bash and expo with food, bicycle enthusiasts, and of course, lots of bikes. Ken Seward, head of the school and event creator, says he thinks the location of the school was perfect for his expo.
We're right among 3 different bike shops, and we thought we'd just invite them all over and do a neighborhood kind of bike bash so we could see the newest and latest bikes for sale.
Seward says when he was planning the event, he had no idea about RVA Bike Month, so this only made the crowd turnout better. For more events, check out the Sports Backers Bike Month calendar. With VCU InSight, I'm Tiana Mosby. Tomorrow, Virginia Capitol Trail Foundation and VCU Health will be hosting bike rides at the Charles City Courthouse. Be sure to check it out. And that does it for this season of VCU InSight.
Make sure to check out our website at insight.vcu.edu.
You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under VCU InSight. Contact us with any stories you'd like to see on our show.
And if you missed our show or would like to watch it again, you can find us on YouTube at VCU InSight. Thanks for watching. I'm Coley Carey.
And I'm Tiana Mosby. We'll see you in the fall.